Alright, just doing a quick video, hopefully quick. Got a couple dings in my chisel here from doing finish work. My kind of finish work, removing some trim and whatnot. Old Craftsman chisel, not really sure what the steel is, but I'm going to tune that up. And just a regular kitchen knife, just doing a quick demo of that because some of the stones I'm using are the ones I commonly use to rapidly recondition common kitchen knives, things like that. And the first stone I want to show off is the Zandstra Foss combination. This is sold as a speed skate stone. It is not the best at just making a nice edge, like a Norton combination stone or an India stone, but what it is incredibly fast. Out of the box, it is really aggressive, like shockingly aggressive, perfect for resetting backs of chisels, things like that, which not too many hand stones can boast that in my experience. It does not shed a whole lot, so it does need to be reconditioned after a couple hours of use. 30 grit silicon carbide or 60 grit even with another hardback stone. I use a Wahida Arkansas stone, and that gets it right back to cranking along. I'm not going to use it to reset this edge, but it is perfect for really beat up kitchen knives. I'm just going to use the fine side, which is still pretty rough in its own right, but as a 1-2, these guys set you up for your medium grit stones, all that stuff. I'm just going to get right to it. When I'm doing chisel work, I'm not a woodworker, I'm a hack in that respect, but I use chisels a fair amount doing things like just general trim cabinetry and I don't know, tree houses, whatever, insetting door hardware, hinges. So I'm definitely not the go-to guy for advice on fine woodworking. But this stone is just astonishing. All this stuff is, I don't think any of it is actually stone. Very slow wearing, pretty decent price-wise. You can get a little more bang for your, a little more life out of all of your stones by emphasizing the trailing pass instead of a pushing one. Normally, if I'm just sharpening this, I do not reset the back every time. That would be a waste of my time, but to work out dings and stuff, I know there's going to be a bunch. So when I'm doing the chisels, I always want to get 2 points of pressure. It gets very challenging for the thinner chisels. It takes a little bit of practice. But for the thicker ones, it's not so bad. And then, as with all knives, I'm just going to give it a quick little bump off the back. You can see just how quickly it's removing steel from that comparatively smaller bevel area, and you can just imagine what this does to a knife. Now I still have a ways to go to work those chips out, but just work around the stone. And then check the scratch pattern to the shoulder. Make sure you're not getting out of whack. I could and should be using a carpenter's square real quick to make sure I'm not getting completely out to lunch. Once these start to drift due to your technique, it's extremely difficult to get them back. The other thing you should be doing if you're doing chisels or plain irons, you should probably be using a guide, but if you're not going to, with one eye, kind of keep an eye on the handle and see how much it's dragging when you stop and start. A little bit's okay, a lot is not. none is better. And every now and then I'm just going to do the backside now because I've whipped up a burr. I've got to grind all the way back to where that chip is. I'm very close. I mean, that's testimony to how fast this stone goes. Not that I'm breaking any records here in general, but for a hand stone doing this kind of work, hard to imagine going much quicker. Chip is almost gone. I know from experience if I don't completely eliminate it on the rough stone, thinking, oh well, whatever's left I'll get on the other side. No, you won't. You'll get all the way down to your medium grit stone and wish you'd spent more time on the coarse one the first time, because you'll be right back there. I sweep at an angle, anything except for, straight across the stone. You could imagine you could get away with that anyway. Almost there. And every time I flip it, I'm feeling a pretty healthy burr forming on each side, but that's what happens when you damage your chisel. So when I get to a point where I'm just shy of working those chips out, and I can see that there's a burr leading up to each side of it, and what's left is just almost indistinguishable, I know I'm very close. And I'm pretty close. What's left, I think, is almost entirely burr. Lighten up the pressure. I think what's left I can take care of on the other stone. This is the fine side. It's still extremely aggressive. This stone is built as an oil stone. It works very well with water, which is one of the reasons I really like it. It will dish. The fine side is considerably softer than the rough side, but it is it's very fast. Makes short work of a wide variety of steel. And it is just a tiny bit soft, and it does a great job of eliminating burrs with just a couple of very light passes. Again, it doesn't make the best standalone edge. I mean, yes, I could probably take and strop this thing right now and it would be good, but I'm going to hit it with a finishing stone, one of the other ones in my collection here. This is just a very pleasant stone to work on. It has great feedback. It makes a little bit of mud, nothing crazy. Removes stock at a good pace. Dishes slowly, responds very well to being lapped with something like a extra coarse DMT. It doesn't glaze. I just work the corners, try to work it down into a loaf shape whenever possible. So I'm holding it with two fingers, bracing the handle against the outside palm of my hand. Very important that the top doesn't jiggle back and forth. I look straight down into it. I don't see any trace of those chips. The way life is, they're probably still there, somewhat microscopic. Take a quick peek. Looks good. And that's it for this stone, and that's what it does well. It saves a lot of time. Onto the 800 grit Juuma stone. Don't ever use oil on your water stones. This was ceramic. I had to bake the oil out of it. These stones are so hard. They're one of the few ones that I religiously do lap probably every time I use them, every other time I use them rather, because otherwise they're impervious to just about everything. They're made with the addition of cobalt. Dieter Schmidt, Fine Things there, sells these. The 800 is fast. These are almost as unforgiving as like a diamond plate though. You will see multiple hatchings from every pass rather. If you lean on it too much. But the 800 is sufficient to follow up that fine side on the Foss. It's fast, it's precise. For regular cutlery, it's a little unforgiving. Although it works great, don't get me wrong, it's just a little more, I think, than is needed. And as a result, you have to, there's no cushion, no room for error. A lot of these really hard stones suffer from what's known as stiction on wide bevel tools. Yeah, back to using oil. Don't do it. If it's a resinoid stone, there's a good chance you'll kill it forever. I was lucky that these were hard ceramic and I had to bake them out and move my barbecue to the far end of the yard, and it smelled like an industrial waste zone. And for what was an innocent coating of a little bit of Vaseline baked into the stone, they smoked for probably 2 hours. So don't do it. I was lucky that I was able to recover these, and now instead of a real nice pretty blue, some year I'll grind back down to the cobalt blue that they came. So if you're looking at this saying, hey, what kind of Juuma stone is that? It's one that survived an almost fatal accident. And this is the 2000 grit Juuma. That other one was the 800. And this guy is, again, very fast. This one's starting to have like a ringy sound to it. Again, these are extremely hard. The addition of the cobalt makes these stones extremely durable, tough. If you freshly lap it, take the time to do it all the way down to the edge, you could almost cut yourself along the edge of the stone. It's that hard of a composition. And again, for being that hard, no real stiction on wide bevels. I should probably write a letter to Dieter Schmidt asking him to order another batch of these. I probably wouldn't buy one because I've got the 800 and the 2000 and they're awesome. But it would be great if they, whoever did these for him, could make like a, I don't know, a 6000 would probably be equivalent to other people's 8. Now this is taking forever. You got to realize that this is not how I do all my chisels, even if I'm doing fine work. Normally, go right to this stone if I'm doing a lot of real bludgeoning work. I'll just sharpen them up on a crystalline, but if I want them to really cut well, there is no substitute. I'm right to the edge. See some of the lines, some of the hatching, sort of like when you're using a diamond plate. That's how hard these are. And then I check it to the square, make sure I'm not getting out of whack one side or the other, and then look for any frosting on the corners where you're rounding the chisel off or not quite getting all the way to the edge. And if you get one right from the factory and you're going to true it up by hand, you should probably use a guide or be ready for a lot of work. If it's a relatively inexpensive one, which is all I've ever bought, so I don't know what you get when you spend a little more money at Lee Valley or wherever. And one of the last stone in the collection, it's a 2000 grit Juuma. Call Dieter Schmidt, get on him about ordering more because he's out. He's the only person that has them. This is the 8000 grit G8 Suehiro Rika. This thing is a fantastic finishing stone. So I finished at a relatively rough grit, and that's right where I want it. So I'm just gonna, I can feel where the edge is. I'm just gonna elevate. You can hear it go from raspy to not raspy. And that's your micro bevel forming. Again, grab it in tight to the hand. Whatever your method is, it's important that you get tight into that hand to eliminate wobble. This is a really hard stone. If you like to finish with a leading pass, you can do so. It'll leave a very good edge. You can it's got just enough give in the stone composition to finish with a trailing pass. So now I'm just examining the edge. I can see a nice light shine along it. But there's no way I've overground all of the previous. So this is still going to be extremely sharp, but it's got good bite. This is perfect for a kitchen knife, especially someone that brought you one that was hammered enough to need to be done on the Zandstra stone. So now I always get the back side. I'm going to actually hit this with a Nagura real quick. Not so much because the surface needed unloading. Well, maybe it did. I just want to start with a fresh surface because once you start getting down on these fine finishing stones, especially the synthetics, you will get some stiction. if there's any kind of movement. You can actually see it. It's not a defect in the stone surface. That's the blade starting to hop a little. You can see how much steel this guy takes off. This is the favorite finishing stone. If you really try to put a bunch of effort to it, it's going to, the blade's going to start hopping. At least on the back. You can get away with a little more on the bevel side. But my favorite combination of stones for a lot of commercial work, that Zandstra Foss combination stone, and then go right to this for a micro bevel. And that handles a lot of my work. Not that I am constantly busy, people knocking my door down or anything, but the G8 is very fast, and you've been set up on the 800 grit and the 2000 Juuma. It just makes this a cakewalk. But the Juuma 2K is really probably comparable to a lot of other people's 4. Certainly it's finer than the Norton 4K, but the Nortons are notoriously rough for their grit rating. They're not, I don't think they're like a true Japanese. And the other thing that's beautiful about this stone is that it's very forgiving of any kind of burr formation. If you don't induce a pressure burr by leaning on it, you're not going to get one. And whatever's there is just going to melt away, which is perfect for these wide blades. Now off of this, I'm just going to elevate the spine just a tiny, or elevate the spine, the handle. And just a very light draw back at the original angle on the back side. I'll put just a tiny bit of a micro bevel, and what I always like to see when I come back to sharpen these, if I put the bevel side down and start to give it a rub, I want to see that the cutting edge stays bright for, 20 passes maybe, and that means I had just that nice, light, even micro bevel. Now in theory, in practice, I'm done. This guy should be pretty much treetop and hairs right off the stone. And then take a look through a loop real quick, make sure I don't have any kind of stubborn burrs or anything. That's perfect. I've got a tiny little micro bevel that's not even the, I don't know, probably a fraction of a millimeter. And this guy's going to be tree-topping arm hair. Which is pretty good because my arm hair is kind of fine. So in my experience, hey, this thing's ready for work. I'm not going to strop it. Normally, I do. I give it a couple passes on a washboard or a hard stone, paper wrapped around it, just a little bit of chromium oxide. I haven't worked with any powder metal woodworking tools. I probably never will because I don't do it for a living, and so it doesn't make sense for me to have the better steels. But for any of these older carbon steels, this G8 does a great job. There's plenty of other stones out there that do the same thing, but this is how I go about sharpening them. The backbone of my setup is that Zandstra Foss. If it's a powder metal, something with a lot of vanadium, something with a DLC coating, and I get it in, then I start to reach more for the coarse diamonds. And it isn't because they do a better job of stock removal, it's because they do a better job of not hatching up the transition line from the shoulder bevel into the black coating. And so if I reset the edge on something like a coarse diamond or extra coarse DMT, follow it, then I have fewer cosmetic problems. The job just turns out looking better, but it's not any better of a job than I get working with the Zandstra stone. and it's considerably faster. So when I'm doing kitchen knives, that sort of thing, I always just pound them. All right, well, thanks for watching. Hope this was informative. There we go.